I'm working on displaying list items in a list view component. And so far, I've created this list item layout file that displays one data item with an image view and a text view. And I'm using a graphic file that's in the drawable resource folder. My next step is to create a new Java class which will extend the ArrayAdapter class. And I'll put that in the base package of the application. I'll create the new Java class and I'll name it DataItemAdapter. And it's going to extend the ArrayAdapter class. I'll type ArrayAdapter and click OK. After the class has been created, and I've deleted the automatically created comment, I'll also set the generic declaration to DataItem. I'm saying that this ArrayAdapter is going to manage data item objects rather than simple strings. Then there's a warning indicator, and I'll use an intention action, and I'll create a constructor that matches the superclass's constructor. Now there are a few different versions of this. I'm going to expand this so we can see everything. Notice that this third version passes in data objects as an array of objects. That's not what I want. I want a version that's going to pass in a Java list, because that's how I'm storing the data. So you can use either of the last two versions. And I'm going to use this one, the one that has 3 arguments for a context, a resource, and a list of data objects. Now, when I create an instance of my adapter, I only really need to pass in 2 values, the context and the data. I don't need an integer resource. So I'm going to delete that argument from my constructor, and I'm going to pass in a reference to the layout file that I just created with r.layout.listItem. Now, as you'll see, I'm not actually going to be using that value. I'm going to be creating my own copy of that layout file whenever I need it. But I do need to pass in this value to the superclass's constructor method. Now, the data is being passed in here as an argument named objects. I need to save that persistently, so I have a reference to it whenever I'm trying to create a new list item row. So I'm going to go up here to the top of the class, and I'll create a list that references data item. And I'll name it mDataItems. Then in the constructor method, I'll save that reference with mDataItems equals objects. And now I have a persistent reference to the data I'm working with. I'm also going to need a reference to a layout inflator object. I'll use the inflator object to open and read into memory the XML layout file. I'll declare this as a field, and I'll name it mInflator. And then in the constructor method, I'll say mInflator equals layoutinflator.from, and I'll pass in the context argument. So now I have persistent references to my data and to the inflator object. Now, each time the ArrayAdapter encounters a new data item and wants to display it, it's going to look for a method named getView. And my job in customizing this display is to override that method. So I'll add the override method down here, and here are the 3 arguments that are being passed in. The position argument is the position of the current data item in the data set, which I named mDataItems. ConvertView is a reference to a layout. Now, that ConvertView might or might not be null. If the adapter is recycling a view for a list row, then it won't be null. I'll actually get a layout. But if it's the first time, then it'll be null. So my job is going to be to make sure that it's not null. I'm going to use an if null statement. I'll use one of Android Studio's templates and type ifn, and that inserts an if null expression. And I'll change the value that I'm examining from position to ConvertView. So if ConvertView is null, I need to instantiate it. So I'll say ConvertView equals mInflator.inflate, and then I'll reference my new layout file with r.layout.listItem. There are a couple of other arguments I need to pass in. The first is the parent view, and I'll get that from the parent argument. And the last is a Boolean value named attached to root, and I'll pass in a value of false for that. So now by the time I get down here, I'll always have a reference to a non-null view that represents the row. And when I return a view, that's what I want to return. So I'll say return convert view. Next, I need to get references to the different view objects in my layout file. I have 2, image view and item name text. I'll create references to those. The first is a text view that I'll name TV Name, and I'll get its reference by calling FindViewById from the ConvertView object. I'll pass in the ID of the view, and that's item name text, and then I'll make sure that I'm casting the return value as a text view object. Then I'll get the reference to the image view, and I'll just name that image view. And once again, I'll call ConvertView.FindViewById, and I'll pass in r.id.ImageView and cast the result. Now I'm ready to display some data. I need to go get the data item I want to work with. I know the position of the data item in the list of data from the position argument. So I'll create a reference to data item. I'll name it item, and I'll get it from mdataItems.get, and I'll pass in position. And now I'm ready to display the item name and image. I'll say TV name.setText, and I'll pass in item.getItemName. Then I'll use the image view, and I'll call setImageResource, and right now I'm only displaying the same image over and over again. And I'll pass in r.drawable.applepie. And then I'm returning the ConvertView object. So now my data item adapter can be used, and here's how I'll put it to work. I'll go over to the main activity class. In the main activity class, I'm once again going to be using the collection of complex objects, and I want that data to be sorted. So I'll uncomment the lines of code that are sorting the data, and then I'll comment out the lines of code that are going and getting data as a collection of strings. And I'll also get rid of the code that's using the default array adapter. And down here, I'll create an instance of my own custom adapter with data item adapter, and then just as before, I'll name it adapter, and I'll get its reference with new data item adapter, and I'll pass in this as the context and data item list as the collection of data. I need to go up here and make sure that I re-import the comparator interface, and then I'll take a look and make sure I don't have any remaining errors, and I'm ready to run the code. When the app comes to the screen, I see all of my data listed in alphabetical order and each of the item names correctly displayed. Now again, right now, I'm displaying the same image for each item, and I'll show you how to fix that and show a different image for each item in the next video.